happy to be here. As I just shared a few minutes ago, if you're just joining, I'm an educator as well. I just do community-based programs. And, you know, this is hard on all of us, not being able to get out there and teach and do what we feel that we're really good at doing. So I will be the first one to tell you I am very distracted by seeing myself right now. I don't often see myself when I teach, but hopefully we'll push through that. So my name is Karla Belzer, and I'm a family life educator with the University of Illinois Extension. I primarily serve Carolee and Whiteside counties. My big topic is really kind of lifespan wellness, so helping people maintain their wellness throughout their life. And that takes on a whole bunch of different forms. Usually I do lots of programming based on brain health, brain development. I do parenting programming. What we're going to do today is kind of just part of our general wellness series. So I'm really thrilled that you all are prioritizing this information, because now this information is more timely than ever. If you didn't know it already, you are in the midst of building your resiliency. And I'll be the first one to tell you, even for myself, some days I'm building it better than others. So I hope today's information is really timely for you. So I do have some resources to share. I put it in the chat box already, but I just put it in again. We do have a handout for today's information. It does have all of our references on there. It also has some additional resources that you might find helpful when it comes to this content. I'm a pretty interactive person, even when I'm delivering these online. So should you have any questions, there is a feature where you can actually raise your hand. I don't think I see it on my end, but down across the bottom, there's your bottom kind of toolbar, there's a reaction. I might not see your hand raised because I don't see everybody's video screens, but you can always pop a reflection or a question into the chat box. I'll try to monitor that as best I can. But I really want this time to be valuable to you and for you, and really hope that you get some good information out of it. And at the very least, that it serves as just a reminder of how you are resilient and how you can best kind of cope with this time. So it's not a surprise. I think we all know this, that stress is an epidemic in our world nowadays. Even before all of this pandemic started, the World Health Organization identifies stress as the global health epidemic of the 21st century. So, and according to the CDC, most people actually identify their jobs as the number one stressor in their lives. Now, certainly as we're all living in this challenging time, that might change a little bit. We're all experiencing stress from having to work from home, even homeschool our children, or just the additional demands that life is kind of placing on us right now. But let's kind of think about why stress is such an epidemic in our country. So if you have any ideas why stress is such a big deal, especially when we think about work, you can just pop anything into the chat box. Why are we stressed out by work, even now?
Well, I'm stressed out because I can't see my kids. I don't get to know that they're okay or share and cry with them. And our school district is not, they're not saying we can't completely do live videos, but they're highly recommending we don't. And that's all I want to do is live videos. I want to see my kids. So that's stressing me out on top of everything else. I also feel really inadequate because I know everything says if you're doing something, you're doing, enough. I know I'm not. I just feel like there's more I should be doing. So I just don't like this control. And Angie, in the last session, you said something that struck me. You said we're grieving, and we are. It's a loss, and we're in the beginning of a grieving process. And I really don't think we're going back to school. I just feel it in my gut. And that's a huge loss for me as a second grade teacher. But we have staff members who have kids who are seniors. This is just devastating to them. So I'm stressed out all over the place.
all of those things are I think certainly experienced by many people, not only on this call, but also even just parents and the children alike. So thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing that. And there's some really great comments in the chat box too that I just want to address a couple of them. Definitely the unknown. You know, this is a time of uncertainty. You know, I kind of joked with my kids earlier that anytime anybody says unprecedented, we should use it like a swear jar, you know, where we put a quarter in the jar and see how big our you know, stash grows. But it certainly is a time of uncertainty. So that increases our stress. Human beings, we love predictability. We love routines. In many ways, our brains are wired for that. So when that gets disrupted, that increases our stress levels. And certainly there's worry about health, filling the needs of students, making sure that we're doing enough, that we're being enough. Also right now, we're hyper connected. It's hard for us to disengage from work, right? My home office right now is in a dining room, a front dining room. We don't use it very often, but I often think of those who are working from home who, you know, maybe they have to walk by it every day. It's in their living room, it's in their living space, it's in their bedroom, you know, depending on the size of the space. So we're always, seems like we're hyper connected to work. And certainly there's an increased work demand as well placed on us. And we have that lack of control over many things in our lives right now. And certainly it is safe to say that many of us feel overwhelmed. We probably feel more fatigued. We might even be questioning if what we're doing even matters, if it's making a difference, if we're doing it right. I think I saw that reflected in the chat box. And if it's really meaningful. And because we're faced with this current situation of adversity and uncertainty, it really creates a barrier for building resiliency and for thriving for many reasons. And particularly that's because it's so open-ended and ambiguous. None of us knows, you know, what is going to happen next or when this is going to end. And also because it has disrupted relationships, as I've seen that reflected in the chat box as well. It's disrupted our roles, it's disrupted our routines. Many of those things are what we find comfort in. And we also rely on those things to kind of enhance our sense of support and well-being. And for teachers, it's particularly difficult because you have to manage the health and well-being of yourselves and your families while also taking on responsibilities for your students in ways that you're not familiar with. You know, there's been that learning curve for all of us, and exactly how do we do this? And when we face adversity, when we face uncertainties, oftentimes we can respond counterproductively. We might feel deflated, we might feel defeated, and we might retreat from the problem itself and those who might help us. So now it's more important than ever to work on building those resiliency skills to not only manage this difficult time, but also to thrive. And you're going to hear me say that word thrive a lot today. That is even just something personally I'm taking on. You know, it's a mindset change from how am I going to get to this day to how am I going to thrive? What do I need to put in place so I can intentionally make the most of this time and to thrive? And that doesn't mean adding more things onto my plate, but it just means shifting my perspective. So I'm changing it from survival to, am I getting something out of this? Okay. So keep the great comments coming. Feel free to respond to those as well. So as we move forward, I just want you to think about, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this little snippet. It's Piper. It's from the Disney Plus has it right now as an animated short. And it is a really great little thing to watch to kind of focus on how we can build our resiliency. This is a video that we have for reference. I've learned through about 1.5 years of using Zoom that on my home Wi-Fi, videos don't play nice. So I'm just gonna give you the link to the video in the handout that I put in the chat box. You can also look it up on your own. But this video shows the ability to overcome adversity and how to come out successful and stronger. And I will tell you, because it's a Disney Pixar movie, you know, they do everything so great. I've even shown it to my children as a little snippet of how, you know, you can rise above the circumstances that you perceive or the circumstances that you're given. And we know that individuals, families, organizations, even society, current evidence, right? We go through trying times. And how we manage those trying times and those challenges really indicates how resilient we are. So today we're really going to talk about the concepts and the definitions of resiliency. We're going to take a look at what research says, or what research has identified the characteristics of resilient people, and why it's important to think about your own resiliency, especially during this difficult time, but also as an educator. And then we're going to talk about some strategies that might be able to help you build your resilience. All right. So with resilience, it does refer to our ability to adapt, to recover, and more importantly, to grow stronger from adverse situations. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, when you feel yourself getting pushed by this uncertainty that we're in right now, getting overwhelmed by this uncertainty that we're in right now, if you could just take a moment and make it your mantra to say, how am I growing stronger from this, right? What am I learning? Even if you need to put that Post-it, on your laptop or on your mirror in the morning or on your fridge or somewhere, maybe even where your family can see it, that is one little trick that we can do, again, to shift that mindset, right? From, I got to get through another day of this, to what is this teaching me? What am I learning? How am I growing stronger? And if we can start kind of changing our neural pathway to seeing that situation in that light, that can certainly help build our resiliency and certainly help us focus on thriving more rather than just surviving. So I want you to think about a broken bone. And I've never had a broken bone, but both of my boys have broken their arms. And the doctors would tell me, when this bone heals, it's actually going to be stronger after the break. Or even think about a rubber band. In order to stay strong during these difficult times, we need to be able to stretch ourselves a little bit. I think we've all been doing that recently, but that can also help us spring forward. And the great news is that resilience can be learned, and it can also be strengthened. Robert Brooks of the Harvard Medical School, he calls resilience ordinary magic, because everyone has the capacity to become more resilient, and there are things that can be done to nurture our resilience, okay? So really, this is a message of hope. So even if you have those days or those moments where you're not feeling very strong, where you're not feeling that your resilience is intact, the hope is that everyone can and does have the capacity to build that muscle, that resiliency muscle, okay? So Beth, I am the same. If I were to pan my camera down, you would see about 20 Post-it notes all over my little makeshift desk here. So I completely agree. All right. So I want you to think about a family, a person, somebody that you know that has dealt well with adversity or with a crisis. And think about what traits that family has, what traits that person has, and go ahead and just throw those into the chat box, if you will. Think about what strengths you've observed from that person. Let me give you a minute to do that. Yeah, flexibility, absolutely. Oh, calm, right? That keep calm and carry on. Good. Seeing the positive, not giving up, positivity. Great. Yeah. There's many strengths that we can think of. I often think of people that I've known that have battled cancer, that have succeeded in their battle in cancer and the adversity that they have demonstrated. My other big kind of example of adversity and a resilient person is even my own grandpa. He was a POW in World War II, and it was kind of neat. Just within the last year or so, we actually found some documentation from the U.S. Armed Services. We never really knew the date of his capture. We certainly knew the date of his release, but we found some communications from the U.S. Army regarding his kind of missing in action and then POW status. But when I think about what my grandpa went through as a POW in Germany during World War II, I just reflect on the crisis that he had to face, the adversity that he had to overcome in that situation. So I think it's really kind of important to keep those images of those people in our minds, so we can reflect on that and really draw on those strengths when we need them. So a lot of times when I think about my grandpa, I think, oh yeah, this is a really troubling time now. I can reflect on, what someone in my family, went above and beyond and not only survived a terrible, terrible situation, I can do that too, right? It can give us that strength, that hope, and that optimism. So in the face of adversity and challenge, I want you to think about what keeps you afloat, what keeps your head above water. Essentially, how high do you bounce? So let's take a look at what research says makes people resilient. All right, so I have lots of characteristics for you, and some of these probably are not going to be big shocks, but in researching resiliency, several characteristics were mentioned and repeated in the literature. So today I'm going to talk about those traits that were most commonly found in resilient people and in resilient families. So when faced with adversity, resilient people, they're able to reframe the situation, and they view challenges and they view difficulties as opportunity for growth. So as I mentioned earlier, that mindset change of what am I learning from this? How am I growing? How am I becoming strong? Every crisis offers an opportunity for us to grow stronger and wiser, okay? They view the challenge as manageable and not permanent. They actually feel that adversity paves the way for opportunity. And speaking of opportunity, you can probably see my 12-year-old trying to get he's trying to make the most of getting his schoolwork. So sorry, I apologize for that disruption, but as educators, you will all be happy that I am educating my children while giving you this webinar. So I have a really kind of cool story about the Ford Motor Company. So we're all familiar with that company. They made cars back in the 1920s. They used a lot of timber, a lot of wood for their cars. And as they were making those cars in their factories, they realized that a lot of waste was generated. Like the stumps, the branches, there's a lot of sawdust, and it was becoming a problem, a crisis, right? They were facing adversity with all of this, leftover material from building the cars. And they really wondered, what should we do with all this waste? Well, they thought about it for a while. They actually found a way to create charcoal briquettes. It's getting to be spring, so hopefully some of us are firing up the grill. They created charcoal briquettes from the waste, and they created a whole new business that's called Kingsford Charcoal. All right. So every challenge we face can provide us an opportunity for growth and from change. Resilient people also learn from their mistakes and failures, but the difference is that they don't see them as failures. They see them as lessons that are being taught, and they try to find the lesson in every situation and learn from them and change their approach. They also have self-confidence in that they take risks. So it's rumored that Edison failed 10,000 times before getting the light bulb to work. So resilient people have these great characteristics that really set up their mindset to think positively in the face of challenges. So I just have a few pictures of some famous people, some people you probably recognize. These people are kind of known as famous failures. So Steven Spielberg, up in the top left, he was rejected from the University of Southern California twice. We know him to be one of the most prolific filmmakers of all time. But he couldn't get into the film school of his choice. He faced adversity and rose above it. Oprah Winfrey, she actually was fired from her first job and was deemed unfit for television, right? And we know she's a media maven, right? She has a whole industry that is based off of her work. And actually, I just heard on the radio this morning, some celebrities and influential people are stepping up and donating to charities during this difficult time. Oprah has committed $10 million to serve charities and help charities do their work through this difficult time. So she also grew up in poverty, and she had, you know, if you've looked into her life story at all, she has certainly had some challenges with how she, the life that she's experienced. Stephen King, his first novel was rejected 30 times. Actually, if it wasn't for his wife, who took the manuscript out of the trash and urged King to finish it, now his books have sold over 350 million copies. We have Sidney Poitier up in the top right corner. When he first auditioned to be in the theater, he flubbed his lines. He had a heavy Caribbean accent, which angrily made the director to tell him to stop wasting his time, essentially, and to go get a job as a dishwasher. And he was actually the first African-American male to win the Academy Award for Best Actor. And you can see he was also honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama. And of course, we have Illinois' own Abraham Lincoln. He was refused entry into law school. He had 3 failed businesses. He lost 9 elections. His fiance died. He faced a lot of adversity, and many of us regard him to be one of the greatest presidents our nation ever experienced. So you can see how a resilient person who possesses that self-confidence can play a major role in overcoming adversity. So we also know, I kind of talked about the rubber band a little bit earlier, but I want to take a little closer look at some of those characteristics. Resilient people have initiative. They're assertive. So they carve out parts of situations that they can control. And I even saw in the chat box where that's part of the difficulty we're having with the current situation is we can't control what we're experiencing. So resilient people know, they accept that we can't control everything that's happening in our lives, but we can control how we perceive it, and we can control how we respond. Now, I also want to be clear and say, you know, we're not expected, especially in these extremely difficult situations and circumstances we're faced with, we're not expected to be resilient 100% of the time. We are going to certainly have times where we have to feel all our emotions, where we have to wonder if what we're doing, you know, is right and worth it, and if it's making a difference, and if we're even doing a good job at it. We are going to have those times, and those are okay. What makes the difference is that we get that out and we carry on, right? We pick ourselves up and we move forward. So resilient people address the situation directly. They deal with what they have control over. I saw flexibility quite a bit in the box when we were thinking about characteristics of resilient people that we know. Resilient people, they're flexible in that they let go of those old ways and they're open to new ideas. And certainly that's been kind of thrust upon us, right? With adjusting to this kind of new temporary way of living. The compassionate trait, the research tells us, it has been identified as a characteristic of resilient people because they know that when you're kind to others, it makes you feel good. So highly resilient people share that compassion. And again, any of these topics or characteristics that I'm sharing with you today, the reason why I wanted to approach you with these is I also want to kind of turn your radar on to when you are seeing these characteristics in our current situation right now, right? So when are we seeing people being flexible and adaptive? When are we seeing people reframe challenges as opportunities? When are we seeing people show compassion? Because all of those things, if we are aware of those, all of those things will work well to boost our own resiliency and build that resiliency muscle. So resilient people are also creative, and they have a sense of humor. So I do have a link in the handout that I sent you of a great clip from Ellen. And I don't know if you've been seeing, they've been having some of their own, I am probably gonna have to mute myself for a second. I'm getting a delivery, so you might hear dogs barking. But Ellen has been doing some posts on her own, and you know, still bringing that sense of joy and humor to individuals, because research shows that humor improves our mood, it relieves our pain, it also improves our immune system. So I know people are concerned right now about their own personal health and the health of others. Humor can improve our immune system, and it certainly soothes tension and relieves stress. So I really would encourage you in the handout that I sent to check out that Ellen clip, because I do think you'll get a kick out of it, and it really talks about why humor is so important. I think this next slide is kind of, at least applies to me these days, right? I've been more distracted than ever with everything that's going on. You know, you're into an email, you're into a Zoom meeting. I was just distracted now by getting a delivery. Children are trying to come in and get homework, and you know, it's that constant mom, that constant demand. Ellen and the research shows that when we deal with things in a humorous way, instead of getting flustered by them, we can improve our overall resilience. So when we think about how when we face stress, it can seem unsurmountable sometimes, if we shift that perspective, we can change those challenging boulders into stepping stones for growth and success. Absolutely. So it's funny how my kids also seem to be eating me out of house and home. So I want to take just a quick look also at attitude, okay? And again, this clip down here is a link to an affirmation video. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh, you know, daily affirmations, you know, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, all of those things, I really would encourage you when the session is over to check out this affirmation video, because I guarantee it will put a smile on your face. So resilient people have positive energy. So I'm going to mute myself. All right, so according to the energy bus, positive energy and people can create positive results. So you can look at positive energy like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And according to the book, The Energy Bus, the most important asset that someone has is energy. So whatever's kind of coming off of us, that contributes to the environment around us, whether it's in our families and in our homes right now, or whether it's in the workplace when all of this is over. So you can choose positive affirmations to motivate yourself and to encourage positive changes in your life, or to even boost self-esteem. So Beth has a question about the handout. I put the link to the handout in the chat box, so you should be able to go and click on it right now, and it should take you to that, that handout link that has all the video links in it. This affirmation video, real quick, it's a little girl standing in front of her mirror, and she's maybe 4 or 5, and she goes on and on. I like my hair, I like my mom, I like my house, I like my brother, I'm good, I like my, you know, she just goes on. And I often think, every time I see it, I think, I never start my day like that, right? I never start my day with, okay, this is gonna be great, you know, I can do this. And I often wonder what would happen if I did, right? How my mind would be set up for resilience throughout that day, and how I could better handle whatever's thrown at me during that day. So we also know through the research that resilient people are positive and they're optimistic. Dr. William James said, it's our attitude at the beginning of a difficult undertaking which more than anything else will determine a successful outcome. So people that bounce back are optimistic, they practice positive thinking, they don't dwell on the negative. So we also know through some research that positive people live longer. There was a famous nun study, it's called the Snowden study. Researchers found that those who regularly expressed positive emotions, they ended up living an average of 10 years longer than those who didn't. So people who regularly express positive emotions, they are more resilient when facing stress and challenges and adversities. So we can fine tune our optimism by being around people that support us, right? And certainly with everything that we're exposed to now, with all the challenges that are going on in the world, I think that's more important now than ever, that we surround ourselves with those positive influences in our life. We really have to be good at filtering out those influences that are going to contribute to our stress and our anxiety, especially in this situation. You know, we can also choose to laugh and surround ourselves with things that help us relieve stress. We're going to talk about stress in a minute. We can even practice positive self-talk. I know that I've been relying on that more than ever now also. You know, when I beat myself up saying, man, I'm not getting my work done. I'm not being a good homeschool teacher for my kids. I'm not doing this right. I'm trying to pick out that one thing that I am doing well. All of that might be true, but you know what? I was a good friend today. I checked in on someone who I know is going to have a difficult time with this, right? I took care of myself. I find something to turn that positive into a negative. We can also fine tune our optimism by trying not to worry about things we have no control over. We have plenty of opportunities to practice that these days, right? We have no control over when or if we're going back to school. We have no control over when or if we get to take that summer vacation. We have no control over how much, you know, food is in the grocery store. There's lots of opportunities for that. It can be way easier said than done to say, oh, just don't worry about it. Like it's a light switch we can turn on and off. I'm certainly not saying that, but if we change our thinking to focusing what we can and what we do have control over, that can certainly help build our resiliency. This one is probably my favorite aspect of highly resilient people. Highly resilient people, they tend to appreciate their blessings and they practice gratitude. So they look at the good in things. So you might want to start taking some time to list your blessings or list what you're grateful for to help you reduce stress, to help build a more positive outlook. Now, this is a practice that really you can and should be doing in your normal everyday life, minus the pandemic. But now more than ever, especially when we're really challenged to find the blessings in these situations, it's a really, really good idea to really start thinking critically about what those things are. And certainly, you know, we can have an influence over our circle of influence, whether that's our family, whether that's people that we interact with on social media, whether it's people that we interact with in Zoom meetings. You know, we can all afford to practice a moment of gratitude and really identify those things that we are grateful for. And sometimes it might be the small little things. Yesterday, or actually today, I had to go pick up a learning packet. So I'm not a coffee drinker, but I got to stop by McDonald's and get my tea, right? That I haven't had in a week and a half because I haven't been out of my house. So, you know, it might not be those big life-changing things that we're grateful for in the small little moments. And it is certainly difficult in difficult times to find those blessings in the current situation. But if you look hard enough and if you have enough focus, you can find the good in this and any situation. So I just wanted to ask a question for the chat box. What are some things that you are seeing as good things that are coming out of the current situations? So Courtney already jumped in and said she's so grateful for these Zoom meetings. More sleep. Yeah. I'll tell you, my 10-year-old, I'll tell you his gratitude. He loves to spend his life really in pajamas. And we counted it up. He has spent 20 days in pajamas, 20 days straight in pajamas. We are looking at that as a blessing, as something we're grateful for, because that's where he's most comfortable. Certainly more time with, he does change his pajamas, by the way, but he just likes to wear pajamas. So being outside more, family time, communities coming together, kids learning things, right? Yeah, more time. Great responses. So it sounds like many of us are already doing these things, but I would really want to encourage you to, in order to continue to build your resilience through this difficult time, to really focus in on those things as well. So I think this is pretty obvious. Resilient people take care of themselves, right? Being kind to ourselves is one of the most critical elements to bouncing back and moving ahead, okay? So we all can acknowledge we're all feeling the pressures of additional stress right now. It's more important, more critical than ever, than probably any other time in our life, that we prioritize self-care. So that means getting enough sleep, getting some exercise, moving our body just a little bit, especially if we are tied to a computer all day with this remote working, if we are tied to our desks all day. We really need to prioritize our physical health and also getting our bodies up and moving for our mental health. Also practicing stress management techniques. Now, whenever I talk about stress, I always point out experiencing a little bit of stress is good every now and again. It can be seen as a positive, but when we experience chronic stress, we do know that it can be difficult for our overall brain health and certainly for our overall well-being. So if we accumulate stress, if we don't manage it effectively or find an outlet for it, it really can become chronic, and those negative effects can really influence our minds and our bodies. And that's simply because when we're stressed, our bodies produce a hormone called cortisol, which in large ongoing doses has been shown to cause a depletion in brain cells, a depletion in brain chemicals. It lowers our immune function. It can increase our weight, increase weight gain. It can increase blood pressure, cholesterol, heart disease, all of those things. And it can certainly make us at risk for depression and other mental health concerns. So managing our stress is essentially crucial at this moment in time as we're all experiencing more stress. So I certainly would ask you and invite you to just, if you would like, to share with the group some ways that you're managing your stress, maybe something new that you've tried to manage your stress during this difficult time. You know, something that you haven't done before. I saw someone earlier talk about meditating. I'm going to talk about that next, actually, about using mindfulness. I know, Debbie, yeah, I tend to eat a little bit more too when I'm feeling stress. So lots of good self-care things. So keep those coming. One thing that I've tried that's new and different for me is I actually took an online country line dancing class, something I've never done before. Something I've always wanted to try, and it was great that night just to get up and get moving and to do something kind of new and different for my personal self-care time. So lots of great ideas. We did some research. The American Psychological Association back in 2015, they said that the most commonly used stress management techniques are listening to music, exercising, as we've seen in the chat box, watching TV, and even surfing the internet. So stress reducers, simply we just need to remember that they need to be something that can help us relax, that they're soothing, that they're pleasurable, and that they make us feel good. It's also good if these stress relievers, if we can build those into our lives on a regular basis. So one way, actually at Extension, we talk a lot about using mindfulness as a way to deal with stress. Mindfulness is our ability to focus our attention on the present moment, not thinking about tomorrow or worrying about what the next day brings or worrying about what happened, yesterday, really focusing on the present moment. And I have found myself using mindfulness techniques and skills even more so since this whole situation has began. The research on mindfulness is pretty great in that it shows mindfulness-based interventions can help reduce our stress and symptoms of anxiety. They can help us cope during those difficult times. They can lower those cortisol levels that I just talked about, and they can also increase our immune response. Now, sometimes when I'm a little careful when I use that word meditation, because that's not everybody's cup of tea, myself included. I'm kind of an active person. It's hard for me to quiet my body and my brain to sit quietly and just focus. But I really want to encourage you that mindfulness is so much more than that. Mindfulness is essentially paying attention to what's going on in the here and the now. Okay, so and whether that's focusing on our breathing, taking a couple of deep breaths in and letting them out, or really noticing our surroundings, or practicing a formal meditation, all of those things are included in mindfulness. So just a couple of kind of tips I want to talk about that you could introduce, right away into your daily life if you're not an experienced meditator or experienced at mindfulness. The first one is just deep breathing. So anytime you feel your stress level rising, anytime that you feel that anxiety level rising, or that you're getting a little bit out of control, just sit quietly. You don't have to sit in a formal position. Usually we like to have people with their feet on the floor, firmly planted. If you're comfortable sitting lotus style or crisscross applesauce on the floor, you can do that as well. And all you need to do is just take 3 to 5 nice deep breaths in. And as you're doing that, really focus on where you feel the breath entering and leaving your body. So some people might feel the breath in their tummy, the diaphragm area. Others might pay attention to how the breath feels moving in and out of their chest, or others still might even notice how the breath feels moving in and out of their nose. But by taking that time to intentionally focus on our breathing, something that we do all the time, but we pay no attention to, that is a mindful pause where we can really stop that stress kind of cycle from going. We can stop that cortisol from coursing through our brains and our bodies. So, that doesn't take really any amount of time, and you can do that anytime, anywhere. You can do it on a Zoom call when you're feeling overwhelmed by what's placed in front of you. You can close your eyes when you do that. You could also, if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, you can just have a soft gaze out the window or down, at your hands or on the floor. Another quick mindfulness exercise that you can do is actually a listening exercise. So again, sitting just in a nice posture, closing our eyes, and just paying attention to everything that we hear for a minute or 2 minutes or however long you're comfortable with. That is a really great way to, again, stop that stress cycle, give our brains and bodies a break from that cortisol. I actually have a chime that I brought home from the office because I thought, even with my kids at home, this might be a good little practice to do when we feel that things are ramping up. Because, many of us don't think of listening as a meditative practice, but when we're turning our attention on to what we're hearing, it certainly can be a meditative practice. So yeah, Jennifer in the chat box says the Breathe app, or Julie says the Breathe app is good. Calm is also good. One that we often mention to people is also Stop, Breathe, and Think, is another great app to look into if you are interested in using an app to practice mindfulness. I will tell you, formal meditations, they're not my cup of tea. So the thing with mindfulness is you need to kind of find what works for you. The last kind of practice I want to share with you just real quickly today is called 5 senses scan, or it's a grounding technique. It actually has been used for people who experience anxiety, but it is something that any of us can implement anytime, anywhere, despite the circumstances that we're in. And what it starts with is, whatever moment you're in, you take a moment and you notice first 5 things that you can see. Okay, so, and they can be the big things, right? But I would really encourage you to look for the little things. Maybe it's a crack in the ground, or a piece of peeling paint, or a water spot on the ceiling, those little things that you might not notice every single day. I actually do this practice when I'm going on a walk outside, because I just find that environment even more kind of rich with sensory experiences. So 5 things that we can see, 4 things that we can hear. So that is anything that we can hear in our environment, whether it's the refrigerator humming, or if we're outside, a bird chirping, a lawnmower in the distance, a dog barking. So 5 things we can see, 4 things that we can hear, 3 things that we can feel. Now, don't think of feeling as just the feeling in your hands, but really kind of turn our attention to what our body feels like. So what our feet feel like hitting the pavement, what our feet feel like in our shoes, what the wind feels like on our skin, or what our hands feel like resting on the surface in front of us. So 5 things we can see, 3 things that we can, or 4 things that we can hear, 3 things that we can hear. I'm sorry, I'm getting all messed up now. 3 things that we can feel, 2 things that we can smell. So this one's a little tricky because not all smells are good smells. But just searching the air with our nose for a whiff of something, whether that's, a fragrance or cut grass or the spring air, whatever the case may be. And then the final thing is 1 thing that you can taste. So what's the taste in your mouth right now? Or did you just have a drink of pop or a juice, or have you had a mint or gum? What is the taste in your mouth? So that is a really quick scan that we can do anytime. Actually, last week, I was on a walk with my children, and I decided to play that game with them. And they really, really liked it. It was kind of amazing And, I didn't set them up saying we're going to do a formal meditation practice. It was, hey, let's take a look at what's going on in our environment, right? Let's bring our stress levels down and really focus on the moment, not thinking about what's happening tomorrow or what needs to happen when we get back home. It can really be a great brain break for ourselves. So I love all the comments that are coming in about mindfulness. We actually have a whole nother session that I give regularly on mindfulness, and I would love to chat more with you all about how mindfulness is such a great practice for all of us. Okay, so moving on in the last couple minutes that we have together, resilient people also have good support systems, whether they're informational, so those are people that we can get and give advice to and from that can help us focus on the situation or help us with the situation. Some support systems are more emotional. We might be getting those affirmations by family and friends. Emotional support systems help us have the confidence to take action and remain focused, or they can even be those concrete types of support systems. So whether that's a physical support, financial support, or even, I love tea. My husband will bring me home a tea today since he's still out working in the community. All of those are different types of support systems that are kind of inherent to highly resilient people. So people who have strong connections, they are more resistant to stress. So we really should strive for those relationships with each other that really can support these things. So the next slide is just, this is also included in the handout that if you clicked on the link, you have access to, just to think about how good your social connections are. You could complete this on your own to check your social connections to see, if you need to, kind of bump up support in any area. So I just wanted to mention that because I did have that included in the handout link. So resilient people also have a vision and purpose. So if I were to ask you what gets you up in the morning, that's your purpose. So both individually and part of a larger team or part of a workplace, resilient people have a strong sense of purpose, goals, and vision. So it's helpful for us to understand how the work that we're doing contributes to the overall vision and purpose and the greater good of what's going on right now. So I don't know about you, but when I first heard of this pandemic coming and all of us being kind of moved to shutdown status, I instantly had to do something about it, right? I had to do something and develop something to support families and kids in this situation. So I actually even took a Saturday, it was like the 14th, I think, and I just started cranking out, all these blog posts and all these tip sheets and all these video resources, because that helped me cope with the adversity around me, right? That I felt like it's something that I could control. I couldn't control what was coming, but I could control my response to it. So I got to work, right? That gave me that vision and purpose to help carry me through that difficult time. All right. So resilient people also have good communication. And I will tell you, part of this resilient communication is also acknowledging where you're at. Now more important than ever. If we're having a bad day, we need to say we're having a bad day, right? If we're struggling with something, we need to say that we're struggling with something. I think sometimes we often get into a role where we have to be strong, and if we admit that we're having a rough time, that people might think we're weak or that we can't handle the adversity. In fact, that's not true. The research tells us resilient people have positive communication. It's necessary for resilient relationships. So when we communicate and when we address and acknowledge what we're feeling and how we're doing in a productive way, it can help us meet life challenges. It can help us also resolve conflict. So I want you to think about that in terms of your communication moving forward. I was just talking with a friend last night that, it's okay to not be okay with everything that's going on. It's okay to not hit it out of the ballpark every single time with everything that's on our plates right now. And we need to get to a point where it's to not be okay and to really accept and kind of embrace that. So again, we can build that response for coming back even stronger and grow and learn from it. So just a few quick effective communication tips. Resilient people, they do practice active listening. They think thoughtfully about what they're going to say, and how they're going to respond. It really is about being very transparent in our communication. Talking about feelings while avoiding blame, using empathy to communicate respect for those listening. Again, especially since so many of us are responding to the current situation in different ways. Some people are totally fine. They're like, hey, not a big deal, not disrupted. I'm still working. I'm still going about my life, where other people are really struggling. It's really important to speak and to listen with empathy and have that understanding that everyone is, at a different place with everything that's going on. Okay. So just a couple more things that resilient people do and how you can apply this to what's going on right now. How many of you feel that you're working harder these days? Can I virtually raise my hand? Given the situation, this is likely very true. So how do we work smarter amid all this disruption? And we know through the research that resilient people, they focus on smart work, not hard work. So some strategies is to simply find a more balanced approach to work. And I hear you, Debbie. I am the same way, overwhelmed, right, with all the work that can be done and should be done and needs to be done. So, this is where our prioritizing skills come in, where we really have to start making some even difficult decisions about what's most important, what's the biggest fire we have to put out that day, and then trying to come to terms with, I'll get to everything else tomorrow, unless there's another priority that comes up. So when we think about working smarter, not harder, it is important that we take breaks, especially if we're working from home. It can be really easy. I think I actually did this yesterday, so I need to take my own advice here. It can be really easy to get into a task and realize it's been 3, 4, 5 hours before I've gotten up, right? Before I've, gotten up to look out the window or let the dogs out or get a snack. We really need to refrain from doing that. So even if it's setting a timer on our phone for every 90 to 120 minutes to get up and take a break, it doesn't have to be a long break, just change of pace, change of scenery, because as we were talking earlier, we normally do that in any given workday anyway. But now that we're not getting up and walking to the copier or going next door to talk to our coworker, we're not getting those natural breaks. Okay, so when we take those breaks, it can help us reset our energy, can help us refocus. Also, try not to multitask. Super duper hard right now, right? With everything that's going on. Researchers tell us that when we multitask, it leads to overall lower productivity and more mistakes. And it's because we're rapidly shifting in between tasks. We have less ability to filter out irrelevant information. So this can cause overall decreased mental organization and decreased difficulty switching between tasks. Now, some of this is going to be harder to do nowadays since, we're all home, our families are home, so disruptions are coming in, and, so my best advice to you is just be aware of it. And when you're finding that it's causing you some trouble, really be mindful of it, pay attention to it, and do your best to only focus on one task at a time. And also make sure that you're finding time, or that you're eliminating those things that are wasting your time, and you're trying to decrease those disruptions. So whether that means closing down your email program, turning off the notifications so they don't pop up every time a new email comes in, even that goes for social media also. Trying to refrain from checking it and really checking in with what's going on in social media, because that can be definitely a time waster and a big distraction. Okay. So 2 more things I want to tell you. So I like this slide because resilient people disengage from work. Again, challenge, because we live where we work right now. This can be extremely hard to do given the current situation. It's very tempting to get lost in our work. But the research says, even if we can't physically distance ourselves from our work, we need to mentally turn it off. We need to try to completely disengage from work when we're away from our home office. And that's simply because we can become consumed by work, and then that will leave less time for self-care. So be sure that you're filling things in your downtime that restore your batteries, that get you recharged, so you can come back the next work day or the next work week even more fulfilled and ready to take on the challenging tasks that we are all facing. So I asked one of my colleagues down at the University of Illinois, Dr. Aaron Abada. He's an associate professor for human development and family studies at the U of I. I asked him by email the other day, what would you tell teachers about how to navigate this difficult time and how to build their resiliency? And these were his big three things that he came up with. And we actually have talked about some of these, but I just want to kind of reframe them and review them. So he says you need to make time for activities, practices, and routines that are restorative. So this might mean creating a routine or a schedule that intentionally includes self-care and support. So your activities should include things that relieve your stress, that create a positive mood, that restore your cognitive capacity to use that directed attention. So that essentially refresh your brain. So sometimes, we might use things when we're under stress, we might use things that distract us or relieve us in the short term, but that might not help us in the long run. So as an example, watching TV or engaging in our devices, they might distract us, but it also might disrupt sleep. And it might not help restore our deleted capacity for focus and attention to tasks. So we really need to be kind of careful about what we're choosing to restore and restore ourselves. So 2 activities that have been shown through research that are cognitively restorative are being or walking in nature for at least 20 minutes and doing mindfulness practices like we just talked about. And I know myself, I've been taking a lot more walks with my family when the weather is nice. It hit me on Monday, you know what, that's still a stressful time for me, right? Because kids have demands and they're asking questions and they're, kind of sharing their stressors with me. So on this Monday, I actually started taking my own solitary walk. First thing in the morning, children are still asleep, and that has been restorative. I've noticed an improvement in my overall mental health. So we talked a lot about reframing what we can't change and paying attention to the positive aspects of the situation. Dr. Abada reflects that as well. But the third one I wanted to mention is that management or moderating expectations for student learning. Recognizing that you and your families, your students and their families are under stress, and really focusing on how you can improve the relationships with the students that you have, if possible, and even their parents. So being open about the changes that are affecting you, using humor, leading with grace. And as I mentioned earlier, that support that I've even received from my son's teacher just meant the world to me last week when I was really struggling. Okay, so we talked a lot about characteristics of resilient people today. These are the ones that we kind of reviewed. We can develop and nurture those traits ourselves as well as our coworkers and students. So I ask you again, how high do you bounce? What traits are you going to commit to working on during this difficult time? How are you seeing these things being played out in our current or even our daily experience with living through this pandemic? So just in closing, 2 slides for closing here. I just want you to remember that we all face adversity. There is a wonderful video, it's the last link on the resources page, of a man who goes through some physical adversity. Resilient people can identify problematic situations, they can handle emotions, they keep calm, they're realistic, they trust themselves, they're empathetic, they look for solutions. But more importantly, remember that challenges represent an opportunity for growth. So you might develop a new set of skills, or you might strengthen your underutilized skills during this difficult time. You will get value from that, okay? So I just want to leave you with one final closing thought, and it's a glass of water. So today we talked a lot about characteristics of resilient people. We talked about taking care of yourself. We talked about how we can build our resilience during this difficult time, but I want you to consider this glass of water. So how heavy do you think this glass of water is? You don't have to answer. You can put your answer in the chat box. It's about half full. It is kind of a heavy, like a thick glass. But how heavy do you think this glass of water is? And honestly, however heavy you think it is, the absolute weight doesn't matter. It really depends on how long I hold this glass of water. If I hold it for a minute, it probably won't be a problem. Now, if I hold it for an hour, my arm's probably going to start to ache. If I hold it all day, my arm might feel paralyzed. The weight of the water never changes, right? It never gets heavier. That's an absolute. It doesn't change. The longer I hold it, though, the heavier it feels. So the stress, the worries of our life, including building our resilience and navigating this difficult time, are just like this cup of water. So if you think about those challenges, you think about those adversities for a little while, nothing happens. If you think about them longer, it starts to hurt. If you think about them all day, you will start to feel paralyzed and helpless. So how can we resolve this stress and worry? It's a pretty simple answer. We can learn to put the glass down, okay? So today, I hope that you will learn to put your glass down during this difficult time. You will work on some of those skills that we talked about today, that you will also see and really look for those opportunities of how you're learning and growing and becoming stronger through everything that you're facing. And at the end, I hope that you feel like you not only survived this challenge, but you also thrived. So with that, that's all that I have for you. I know I went a few minutes over. I can hang on for some questions. I do want to show you, I do have a slide. These are all the video slide or video links that are in your handout that I sent you. I'm also going to throw some additional links up in the chat box. I'm going to manage all my screens here. There was a really great resource called Compassion Resilience. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. They have some great tip sheets on many different areas of resilience. The University of Illinois Extension has developed some healthy living resources for families. We've always had the site, but we have some specific tools for families right now. And then Extension has also developed some specific responses for the COVID-19 situation. So those links are also in the handout that you should have too. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angie.
Karla, I just have to tell you, and for those of you who are hanging with us, this was probably, we've been doing a lot of networking and communication, but I think that this was so needed and so appreciated. So I just want to say thank you so much for leading us through the conversations. Lots to think about, and that self-care piece is so important. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, I appreciate, I mean, that goes both ways. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I'm a helping person, I'm in a helping profession, and you gave me the opportunity to do that today. So you all helped me build my resilience. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody. If there are any questions for Karla, I think we can hang out for a few minutes, but otherwise, have a fantastic weekend. Practice some of those mindfulness strategies. Take time for yourself, and look forward to starting the next week fresh. So
ready to go. Yep.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. And if anybody has any questions, go ahead and unmute yourselves, and we can talk through some things.